Kia ora, welcome everybody. We're going to do the usual webinar thing where we allow a couple of minutes just for people to join. So thank you for coming. We'll just let people roll into the room and give ourselves a couple of minutes before we start the webinar proper. So welcome. Great to have you here. And we'll get started in just a minute. Welcome everybody. We still have lots of people rolling into the room, so we'll just wait another minute before we get started with the webinar proper. Thank you very much for joining us. One more minute because I can see people are still joining at pace, which is great. Excellent. Well, it's 2 minutes past 12, so I think we'll get started properly. Kia ora, koutou katoa, ko Fiona Macmillan toko ingoa. Welcome. I'm Fiona Macmillan, the Director of Communications and Engagement at the Aotearoa Circle.
And I am Izzy Fennick, a guardian of the Aotearoa Circle, and I guess a guardian of the Rangatahi Advisory Panel too. And it is my pleasure to co-host this session with Fiona today and welcome you to the Aotearoa Circle webinar focusing on our Rangatahi Advisory Panel.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, everyone. We really appreciate you sharing your lunch hour with us. For the next 60 minutes or so, Izzy and I are going to guide you through the world of our Rangatahi Advisory Panel. But first, I'm going to do the usual admin and housekeeping. So, all your questions, please. We love them. We welcome them. The wrappers are ready to answer them. But please put them into the chat in writing, and you can do that at any time. We'll be recording the session for you, and we do intend to make it available via our website. So you can refer back to it or share it, which we'd also encourage if you need to.
Awesome. And Fiona is now going to talk you through some of the background of the Aotearoa Circle, and then I'm going to give you a brief history of the panel and the purpose that sits behind it.
Kia ora, thank you, Izzy. Okay, let me get started then with a quick potted history of the Aotearoa Circle. It was founded kind of across 2018, 2019 by Sir Rob Fennick. And Sir Rob happens to also be Izzy's dad. So it's probably a good thing that I'm doing this part so that I can say lots of lovely things about him rather than put Izzy on the spot talking about her dad. So let me tell you a little bit about Sir Rob first. He was an inspirational New Zealand businessman who was focused on businesses that were really dependent on nature, such as oysters and natural water. And that was one of the factors that had him deeply concerned about the degradation of our natural world and of Aotearoa's natural capital. And he was aware that actually all businesses rely on nature in some form or another. So Rob wanted to see an Aotearoa where the public and the private sectors could both work together to get things done, things that would help restore our natural capital for future generations. And before Sir Rob died from cancer in 2020, he well and truly set us on the road to working together as a partnership that's unique because it does, as I say, brings together both the public and private sector organisations. Our aim, our purpose, is to achieve systems change that will restore Aotearoa's natural capital for future generations. And hang on to that future generations part because that's why we're here today. Doing that will help make sure we can have a prosperous New Zealand, which is resilient and adaptable. Now, when we change the slide, you can see the list of our partners here. These are some of New Zealand's leading organisations, as you can see. And you can also see that they really range across that public-private sector partnership that I talked about, which is part of what makes us unique, having that really great mix of leading companies and organisations working together to achieve change at a systems level. And up to 10 of those partners contribute young professionals to the Rangatahi Advisory Panel, which Izzy will explain all the background to very shortly. But first, what do we actually do at the Aotearoa Circle? Well, we have 5 years' work behind us that you can find on our website. But let me give you a little sample from this year so far. In April, we published a report that got a lot of attention among New Zealand businesses. That's the one in the top left of that slide. It's called Protecting New Zealand's Competitive Advantage, and it showed that New Zealand exporters need to really think about how they're reporting their environmental performance, because over 80% of our exports by value are going to countries with mandatory climate-related disclosures, either in force already or proposed. Then we put out a report about modern genetic technology. That's the one on the bottom left on the slide. That report actually came to life because of the Rangatahi Advisory Panel, and Izzy might explain a little bit more about that too. And we've also this year published 2 separate sets of climate change scenarios. These are designed to help New Zealand businesses. The 2 produced this year look at what could happen to both our transport and our energy sectors. The scenarios help those sectors to think about how to prepare for climate change and reduce their own climate impacts. So that's some of the work from this year alone. Izzy, over to you.
Awesome, thanks, Fiona. So with the Aotearoa Circle having an aim to restore Aotearoa's natural capital for future generations, it seemed almost counterproductive to not have future generations at the table contributing to the work that the Circle was doing. And I was personally a bit of an unintentional toe in the water for intergenerational contribution for the Circle's work after Vicky, the CEO, asked me to speak at the Circle's Fenwick Forum event. And after that, I basically wouldn't leave her or the Circle alone. Dad had told me before he died that the Circle was his last big effort to positively contribute to the systemic changes that New Zealand needed to thrive. And so I felt really passionately about being as involved as I could. And while I think my contributions were good, I couldn't and I didn't want to speak for all New Zealand's future generations. For one, I was quickly approaching more of a youth adjacent age than I would like to admit, but mainly I was also just one person. So we looked at, what would it mean to have a full panel that was contributing in some of the areas that I was trying to by myself. And having been the only young-ish person at a few of these tables, I knew that we would need to work quite hard to ensure that the experience wasn't tokenistic or end up being more of a focus group type experience. For it to be mana enhancing and impactful, we really needed those contributing to this space to feel empowered to contribute strategically, which is a territory that is often quite exclusive. Our society, whether intentionally or unintentionally, often tells young people that their worth or value is directly linked to their experience or how long they've been doing something, which just isn't true. So I knew that the group would need a really concentrated support to ensure that all parties didn't fall back into some of these old habits, these unconscious biases that we know sort of sit in some of these spaces. We also knew that the experience needed to come at no financial cost to those contributing, which is a trap that young people often fall into because they care so much. They want to contribute to spaces that ends up then being a bit of a financial impact on their lives. So we wanted to establish a system that meant any of the rangatahi involved were always compensated for their time. So we looked to have their employees do that through the salaries that they already had working with those organizations, and this to get folded into the work and the role that they already had within that organization, which is why the rangatahi that contribute to this work come from the Circle's leading partners. And because we want the panel to be diverse for all of the obvious reasons that we know and love, and in all of the usual ways, we also wanted it to be disciplinarily diverse from a disciplinary perspective. We intentionally wanted to have a rangatahi that did not necessarily have a sustainability background coming into these spaces as well as those who did. So we intentionally have our leading partners distribute the opportunity to all rangatahi within their organisation, not just those that might have some sustainability experience. And in both years, because this is our second year, we've ended up with a pretty even split of people who have some sustainability experience and some who have absolutely none. And without a doubt, this has generated some really interesting and important perspectives in this space. There are three main aims of the panel. One is providing intergenerational insights into the Aotearoa Circle's work streams, which looks like perspectives, ideas, and insights being formally integrated into the work stream progressions of a chosen work stream from the Aotearoa Circle. And that this intergenerational contribution is really centered around the decision-making process of how that work stream evolves. The second aim is positive development for the rangatahi involved, and that looks like enabling some development of their governance and critical thinking skills, while also building confidence and capability to step in some of these spaces that have traditionally been quite exclusive. And the last is intergenerational insights for the Aotearoa Circle and its leading partners. So quite similar to that initial aim, which is about providing insights and contributions to work streams. The same is about providing those same insights and intergenerational contributions to the circle itself at a strategic level, and also to the leading partners who contribute our rangatahi to this panel. And that looks like each leading partner gets one panel session a year on a strategic initiative of their choice. And my role now, and it's a role I think is a pretty critical one when considering undertaking an exercise like this, is really to safeguard the group and the panel, and to push back on some of those traditional biases that creep in. And the most common example of that is the tendency to treat a panel like this as a focus group, not a governance or advisory group. And so I spent a fair bit of time reminding everyone that asking questions is just as important as having an opinion. And, a focus group is often, this is what I think about something, but a governance group is really questioning the decisions that have been made. Why are we doing it like this? And I think, that asking those questions is a development in that critical skill around governance, but it also helps build the sense of confidence and wisdom that sometimes asking questions is enough, and that you don't have to have an opinion on something, but that can take a fair bit of confidence as well. And that challenge to keep questioning was exactly what happened in last year's Rangatahi Advisory Panel, and had some really direct, successful outcomes. So last year's Rangatahi Advisory Panel were involved in the Agri Adaptation Roadmap, and they asked two really critical questions in the session that they were in at the time. One was, why is the 1.6 degree scenario featured in this report when our latest science is telling us that this is nearly impossible to consider if we're on our current trajectory? And the other question was, why isn't the biotech element a bigger focus or bigger consideration within this document? And that question around biotech, from a generation that didn't necessarily have some of the same assumptions or concerns around biotech as previous generations might have, really sort of unlocked and gave the Aotearoa Circle the nudge it needed to create a whole work stream really around biotech. And that was the Modern Genetic Technology report that was then released in May this year. There are lots of things that I wish Dad could see now in terms of the work that I've contributed to and the direction that the circle is taking. But I think that the Rangatahi Advisory Panel would be one of the things that he'd be most both surprised but also really delighted by. His work was always so focused on what was being left behind for future generations, and the acknowledgement that our resources were finite. And I found this quote from an article that he wrote just before he passed away that I think sums up his thinking in the space really well. He said, "It is reasonable to predict that in 100 years, our biological economy could be bankrupt, and that's a horrific legacy to bequeath future generations." So I think he'd be really proud of how deliberately we are including future generations into this work, and really continuing to reject some of the standard practices that might come in spaces like the ones that Aotearoa Circle sits in order to chase as much impact as we possibly can. So much of his thinking around the Aotearoa Circle was also really based around this idea of collaboration and bringing public and private sector together. And I think that this advisory panel creates a whole new level and a whole new layer to collaboration, which is an intergenerational collaboration. And if we recognise that for younger New Zealanders, this degradation of our natural resources is more of a existential threat than for the generations currently making decisions in these areas, it's really a no-brainer that we bring more of them into these spaces. And arguably, it's their voice that should be the dominant one in any conversation about how we restore our natural capital. And that is a future I would be really interested in, a future that truly recognizes the importance of intergenerational co-design and the empowerment of those who will have the most to lose and the most to gain when we think about the spaces that we're in. So that is a little summary about the history of the circle, the process that we go on, and the purpose that we're hoping to achieve with it.
Awesome, thank you so much, Izzy. Can we now bring in two of our rappers? Can I introduce Zoe Tilsley, who works at Westpac, and she's part of our 2024 Rangatahi Advisory Panel, and Bryn Wilson, who works at Mercury and is also a 2024 RAP team member. Guys, we're going to hand over to you to talk us through the kind of the what, why, and how of being part of the team this year.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Fiona and Izzy. Some awesome words spoken there. So I'll just start off. Kia ora koutou katoa, called Bryn Ho. My name is Bryn Wilson. As Fiona mentioned, I work for Mercury Energy as a commercial analyst. So one thing that Izzy mentioned was taking into perspective a wide range of perspectives, and mine comes from a non-sustainability background. I'm essentially in the back of the office smashing out reports and data sets. So don't have a professional background in sustainability, but I do enjoy sustainability in a personal aspect. Enjoy running, kayaking, hiking, rugby, diving, fishing, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. Everything that Aotearoa has holds close to its heart. So it is on a personal level where I found the interest for the Aotearoa Circle's Rangatahi panel. That is essentially my why. Obviously, the governance experience is also a big bonus, but the real reason that I started or put my hand up to get into this role was because of my love for nature and Aotearoa as a whole. Being able to give back and influence opinions that will ultimately have a material impact on our future and Aotearoa's future was a huge bonus for me. And I'll just pass over to Zoe to introduce herself. Thanks, Zoe.
Thanks, Bryn. Kia ora e te whānau, ko Zoe Tilsley, toko ingoa. As Fiona mentioned, I work for Westpac New Zealand as a sustainability manager in climate change and environment. So I get to look after the bank's operational emissions target and reduction efforts, how we remain net carbon zero, and how we do our gross reduction efforts, and also a credible offsetting plan as well, which keeps me very busy. But on a more personal level, I hail from the North Shore of Tamaki Makaurau, and I spent most of my childhood at the beach or on the water with my family. This is where my strong affinity for New Zealand's natural resources began, and is often it continues to be a motivating factor for the work that we do, because often the sustainability space can be relentless and it is hard work. So it's nice to kind of center myself back in nature when needed. Having studied management, psychology, and criminology, I was always really interested in the intersection between the E and the S of ESG. And so naturally, I'm incredibly proud of the mahi that I'm involved with at Westpac across climate change, natural capital, and our human rights work. And also being in the sustainability team, I was very close to what the Aotearoa Circle was and the work that they were undertaking. So when the opportunity came up to apply for the panel, I did not hesitate, and I actually applied for it last year. It didn't make the cut, but was adamant to apply again this year, just from seeing the opportunities and experience that my predecessor from Westpac got out of it. So very happy to be on the panel this year, and would encourage anyone, if they have applied and not made it yet, to keep going, because it is definitely worth it. Bryn, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Zoe. Just wanting to touch next on our time in Wellington, spent with Minister Watts, the Climate Change Minister, which was an absolutely amazing experience. Obviously, as youth, as rangatahi, we don't often get a seat at that table, as high up as the Beehive or Parliament is. And it was somewhat difficult to put into words how empowering that session was for us, not only as from a professional and a sustainability perspective, but from a personal growth perspective. We initially, when we first got the call up, or we got invited to the Beehive, it was exciting and it was somewhat daunting. Obviously, like I said, we don't get an opportunity like this often, but when the opportunity does present itself, you know that we were all raising our hand, and we're very excited about it. It was somewhat daunting in the fact that we had no idea what to expect. It's an incumbent government. They're making changes, and we didn't know how we would be perceived in the Beehive. But after the session, it was seriously, we all had smiles on our faces. It was a lot of cheers and congratulations. And yeah, so for me, what I got out of that, it was amazing for confidence, and to know that our voice was wanted and is actively being seeked out at a seat, in a place like the Beehive. It was mana enhancing from a personal perspective, and especially so with Minister Watt's position. He's got obviously turbulent waters to navigate, and I think that he made us feel extremely welcomed, and definitely made our voices feel heard. How did you interpret that experience, Zoe?
Thanks, Brent. I think we have some photos to share. I'm not sure if they're on the screen or not, but yeah, completely agree with you, Brent. Mana enhancing is definitely, I think, the perfect way to wrap up the day. So obviously we were invited to present our feedback on the second emissions reduction plan. There we are, all smiles. On the second emissions reduction plan to Minister Watts, and as Bryn mentioned, obviously this can be a daunting call up, but we were all pretty keen to make the most of the opportunity, and it was definitely not your typical Wednesday in the office. So as a panel, we'd kind of prepared what we wanted our key messages to be around the second emissions reduction plan, and planned on how we would deliver these messages across the panel. These key messages included the need for nature-based solutions, making the document more human-centred and more accessible, so reframing the 5 pillars in which the document is based on, also reframing the least cost approach and wording that is throughout the document. We talked about the vision versus reality in terms of proposed technology solutions, and the need for consistency in messaging between the public and private sector when it comes to the urgency in which this transition needs to happen. As Bryn mentioned, it was definitely a very engaging experience, and we really felt that we were listened to, and that our feedback had been taken on board by the minister. For me, personally, it was incredibly empowering to be sitting in the beehive around the minister's table. It doesn't really get more high up than that, really. So it was a special day. And afterwards we reflected as a panel together that the real strength of the panel is our diversity in background and experiences. We all work across New Zealand's largest corporates, but we approach things with a different lens. But at the end of the day, we come across as a unified front and reach the same conclusions and the same views, which I think if there are any businesses that are wanting to create their own RAP, it's really important to get that diversity of thought rather than get it from one section of the organisation. And the way in which this was evident on the day is that the way that each panel member presented their feedback was very, very different, and we all covered different key messages, but I think they were all just as effective as each other, which I think the minister really appreciated, that diversity of conversation, and noted that not all of his meetings go the same way that ours did. I think we've got a video to share as well from our session. Oh, Izzy, you're on mute.
Hannah's going to upload that or share that now. Thanks, Zoe.
Cool, thank you.
And so absolutely, that perspective has a huge value to aid us on that journey, and it needs to be more part of the conversation, the narrative going forward. So I'm really excited about that. I think we've just got to continue on this journey.
I love the in the background, Izzy, agreeing along there. So just to wrap up how that session went, for me, obviously the opportunity to be there and to build a relationship with the minister, and now know that he's very approachable. He wants to hear our thoughts and feelings, and indicated that it shouldn't just be a one-off conversation, it should be continued, and both for Westpac as well. For me at Westpac, continuing to strengthen that relationship with pretty key stakeholders at government was really valuable as well.
So we were lucky to have such an incredible panel that really shared some insightful and thoughtful things for him to think about and consider. And it was a great day. We want to now bring in a couple of our other RAP members too. I want to welcome Morgan Pepper and Maggie Powell from our 2024 RAP, and also an OG rapper, Tom Highland, from our 2023 RAP. Zoe and Bryn, I think you are staying in for questions if you'd like. But otherwise, a couple of questions, from me and Fiona. I'll start us off. We've heard from Zoe and Bryn a little bit about why they wanted to join the Rangatahi Advisory Panel, but Morgan, I'd love to hear why you wanted to join, and you were a late joiner to the group with a bit of a handover in the middle. So, keen to hear what it was about the panel that made you interested.
Yeah, sure. My name's Morgan. I'm from ANZ. I work in the property finance team with them. I was late. There was another colleague of mine did the first half of the year, but she's moved on to a new opportunity, and I got to sneak in there for this last half of the year. It's been a bit of a baptism in fire with what we've had on in the last couple of months, but it's been great. The reasons that I was thinking about this, the reasons that I wanted to, it's a multitude of reasons, some selfish and some more altruistic. Selfishly, I see that sustainability is really flourishing and becoming more important, and it's only going to get more important in our professional lives in the future. And I think that looking forward into my career, sustainability is going to play a massive part of it. And so this, for me, was an opportunity to get in there. My day-to-day role doesn't have a lot to do with sustainability on a deep level. So this was a really good experience for me. And I'm always looking for challenges and opportunities as well. And so being part of the RAP has afforded me the chance to occupy an intimidating space and use my voice. And so I'm excited about that challenge. And then from another side of it, my understanding's grown in the sustainability space, I was surprised to learn to find that some people, only the generation, like not people I wouldn't have thought were that removed from me, thought about sustainability in a different way, and that maybe a lot of people still aren't there yet, and they're not on the journey with us. They're not quite getting the urgency, they don't get the weight of the choices that are being made here and how they'll impact the future, my future. So if anyone's going to be up the front defending it, I'd like it to be me or people like me. So yeah.
Awesome. What a beautiful answer. I certainly want it to be people like you as well. Maggie, can you share a little bit about what's been different about the experience than maybe what you expected it would be like? Have there been any surprises, or was it exactly as it was kind of sold to you?
I didn't really have any expectations when I came into this experience. I would love to have a career in governance, and I'd love to sit on an executive someday, hopefully in the not too distant future. And to have that experience and that exposure is something that I viewed as an invaluable opportunity. From a personal level, I've got more out of interacting with my fellow RAP members than I think I'd given myself credit for before coming into this opportunity. I'm sitting alongside, not being biased, some of the best and brightest across the public and private sector, across RAP from last year and RAP this year. And I know that these are the people that I'll sit alongside in 20, 30, 50 years to come, and we'll all still be championing how important it is to have a sustainable future for not only our generation, but the generations that will follow us. So it's been a hugely empowering opportunity. And just to have the experience like Zoe and Bryn touched on around engaging with government and ministers, with business leaders and decision makers is something that not many people in their early to mid 20s get to do. So yeah, definitely one of the coolest things I've been involved in my early part of my career.
Awesome. Thanks, Maggie. Zoe, I'd love to know, and outside of getting a trip to the Beehive, which I heard Bryn nearly call the White House, which I also loved, other than going to the Hive and getting to spend time with Minister Watts, what's the best thing that you've gotten out of this experience so far?
I think just like reflecting on what Maggie spoke about, like being together as a panel, and we've reflected on this in the 2024 panel, there is something pretty powerful about being together with like-minded individuals, similar age ranges, but I don't think that really matters too much, but it feels very powerful sitting in these meetings and forums knowing that you have each other's back 100% and trust exactly what is going to come out of their mouth. And I think the confidence that has come with that has been probably one of the most valuable things for me. We're all pretty comfortable within our own organizations and speaking to senior leaders and executives, but taking it to that next level of speaking to external organizations, politicians, I think that has been really, really cool. And the sense of community and family that has come with it is really special. Alongside that, we had our Westpac leading partner session with the panel a few months ago, where I got to play the tricky kind of in between both being Westpac side and RAP side, and for us that was really valuable. We had lots of senior leaders there, and we spoke about our refresh of our sustainability commitments and our materiality process, and could go on about what we got out of that session, but that too was very valuable, not just for me but for Westpac as well.
Sorry, thank you. This is probably a good time for me to jump in and say we'd love to get questions from the audience. So if anyone wants to pop a question in the chat, you're really welcome. But actually, Bryn, can I bring you in? I've got a question for you. I'm really interested to know, because we'd love the idea to spread, right? We don't want to have any kind of exclusivity on the idea of listening to rangatahi. So what advice would you have for other New Zealand organisations that maybe want to get more input from young New Zealanders?
Awesome, thank you, Fiona. So Mercury is actually setting up an internal rangatahi panel as we speak. Our first session is tomorrow, which is a really exciting opportunity internally. I think one thing in building the internal rangatahi panel for us was just making sure that people feel comfortable to speak, from a position. Generally, youth aren't in positions of power, so it needs to come from youth for youth, if that makes sense. And we're really lucky at Mercury because we've got some direction from high up. So we were able to start with something that we knew they wanted some advice or perspective on. So yeah, if you're thinking about setting up something similar, I would say go for it. Worst case scenario, you get a different perspective on various governance decisions. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you, Bryn. Awesome. And also other rappers, if you want to jump in with any of these questions, if you've got a little offering to make, please do. But Tom, can I get you to tell me, what are some of the things you think, if another business organisation is looking at setting up their own rap, what should they not do?
Yeah, it's a good question, Fiona. I think it's really important that engagements like these should not just be symbolic gesturing. And it might be difficult in the first year of doing it to find that sweet spot, but it's really important that that engagement is A, genuine, and B, serves a real clear purpose. And thirdly, it is held at kind of a timely spot for consultation, allowing those insights to be digested and then acted upon. And taking all that into account, it's important to consider those pieces. But as Bryn said, also, don't be afraid to give it a good crack as well, and at least trial.
Tom, I'm really interested because you were, as we said, part of the kind of the OG 23 rappers.
OG rapper.
What has stuck with you? What's different about you as a person now from before that experience?
Yeah, I think there's probably three big things that come to mind. One would be, you gain some good technical expertise as well, and experience on that knowledge front with the workflows of the leading partners and the circle. But secondly, I think the confidence you build in challenging decisions or challenging ways of thinking in a way that is clear and backed up by evidence, and just being comfortable to speak your mind and be confident in your own ability and that you actually have a valued intuition. And then I'd say thirdly, the connections I've made and building those relationships with some emerging leaders has been awesome, and also those that have been running the sessions, and building a great relationship with head guardian Izzy of the panel has also been great, and learning as much from her as possible. But yeah.
Well, let's talk about Izzy a little bit, actually. Maggie, I'm going to ask you to jump in. How would you describe the role that Izzy has in this whole experience?
She's pretty fundamental. I think all of us can probably testify to that. She, and I think Izzy kind of beautifully sums up how an organisation should set up their own RAP, is to have a guardian who embodies the role that Izzy plays for the Aotearoa Circle's rep. She holds mana, she holds respect, her ability to articulate what we're thinking, because we're not always sure how to say something or how not to say something. And just her ability to take people on the journey of what it means to be a young person in business, a young person at the decision-making table, because she's been there, she's lived it, she's breathed it. And she is a guardian. And I also think she's a friend. She's someone that can support us within our work at the RAP, but also someone who I know will be there as a sounding board for us as we continue to move through our careers. So having an Izzy, whatever that looks like in your organization, I think is hugely important. And yeah, not trying to, blow Izzy up too much. But yeah, just her ability to relate as a, I'm not even going to call you a youth adjacent, as a fellow rangatahi who's seen and experienced this firsthand, is something that's hugely important. So thank you, Izzy, for everything that you do to support us. We do really appreciate it.
Such a pleasure.
Well, Izzy, can I ask you a question then? It's very difficult not to compliment you because you do such a damn good job. But what would other organisations need to get themselves their own Izzy? What are the qualities that person needs? Tell us about the role. If I'm looking to put a rangatahi advisory panel in place, who's my Izzy? What am I looking for?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely don't have to be too much like me, other than like take this really seriously. Like I take it really seriously. There's nothing, tokenistic or nice to have about this. It's a critical component to the success of the work that the circle does. And so I'm savagely protective of their time and their psychological safety. And I think even understanding that those things are impacted by doing work like this is important. So potentially the fact that I've got some lived experience in being, a minority in some of these spaces, which is exactly how a panel like this shows up. The majority of people in these spaces do not look like the rangatahi, and have had different experiences. So I guess someone who can, accept the responsibility of taking this as seriously and as importantly as it is. And even, someone that is considering the potential negative impacts of doing this kind of work as well as the positive. Like we spent a lot of time today talking about the positive implication of this kind of work: develop skills, develop confidence, empowering, get to contribute. But it is also pretty confronting to be staring down the barrel of some of the issues that we touch on. And I spend a lot of time trying to make sure that they feel like they can process some of the situations that we find ourselves in, or some of the topics when they get heavy. So yeah, someone who's going to take it seriously and see their role as protecting the importance and the value that this panel provides.
Thank you. We are getting some questions built up in the Q&A, which is great, and we'll get to those in a minute. Please feel free to send us some more. But Izzy, if you want to throw a couple more questions at the rappers now, then we can go with the audience questions in just a minute.
Yeah, nice. I am conscious we've only got about 6 minutes, so maybe we'll do one last question for you, Morgan, around and I guess it's kind of a perfect segue off some of the things that I've talked about. Some of the stuff that we talk about is really around the future and the implications on future generations in the spaces that we play. How optimistic are you about your future, and has that changed, or do you see it evolving based on the work that you do in some of the space with us?
Yeah, we talked about this the other day, and you said, Izzy, and I agree, I'm not optimistic. I don't think everything will magically work out fine, so we don't need to worry about it. But I am hopeful that we can make it happen. I think I'm hoping that there'll be enough young people who are sick of the uncertainty of their own future. At the moment, we've got a lot of questions floating around our heads, with weak answers, to be frank. Will my coastal town that I want to retire to exist? Is it wise to have children? What will a safe investment look like in 2050? I feel that, I hope very strongly that, I feel that hope really strongly when we get together as a group. So when we get the panel together, and then when we go into spaces and we're listened to by people who have the ability to shape at the moment, and then meeting all these guys and seeing that our future leadership types are going to have this front of mind and understand the impact. So that has made me more hopeful than I was since joining, and it's only been a couple of months. And it's just important to have, I think when we have youth in the space and we have that diversity of thought and that vested interest, I think that we'll be able to make those changes. And every time we get together, I think about that, and more hopeful every time we meet.
Awesome. A little bit of potential extra hope for you when you talk about, the more emerging generations we have in this space. 47.5, give or take a point, percent of New Zealand's population is now Gen Z and millennial. So, slowly but surely total global domination, hopefully. Fee, we do have a few questions coming through. Do you want to grab a couple?
Yeah, so here's one from Charles, who says, "Kia ora, I love the kaupapa." Thank you. Navigating government could have been challenging. How was your experience? And suggest maybe someone other than Bryn or Zoe talk to this, given that we've heard your thoughts, Bryn and Zoe, already. So Maggie and Morgan. Maggie, do you want to tell us, how was the experience of navigating government?
Yeah, completely can be summed up by the word daunting. It's like these guys have touched on, it's not something that we get to do every day, let alone maybe once in our career. But I think the beauty of having this panel by my side was that we all had very different experiences, very different ways of interpreting what was put in front of us. And collectively, we were all able to present a united front to the Minister of how their emissions reduction plan was being interpreted by 8 pretty strong-willed young people across leading New Zealand businesses. And none of us had been involved in a consultation. I don't think any of us really knew what we were walking into. We were fully prepared and fully armed with our points and what we wanted to convey. And if I'm being honest, the Minister led the front in making us all feel very comfortable. He set the scene, he set the feeling and the vibe of the room, and his reactions to what we were saying, I think helped us to have that conversation with him, because it made us feel like our thoughts and feelings were being understood. And the conversations that we had with him afterwards was, I think we all felt that there was going to be some action and some conversation that came out of that session. So I don't think that there's any easy way to navigate government. I'm probably not the best person to give advice on how to do it. But as a group of young people, we all felt that it was really important that we didn't go in with siloed opinions, and we didn't go in representing our organisations, because that plan that was put in front of us is so much bigger than the impact that it has on the companies that we work for and work alongside, and to look at it as young people and what that means for us today, what that means for our future in 2035, and then what that means out to 2050 and beyond. So yeah, I'm not sure whether I've answered that very well, but navigating is hard, but doing it with people that can back you up and support you and help you to share your narrative, I think is hugely important.
That's awesome. Any thoughts to add to that?
Well, I just think there's a perfect kind of segue question here from Claire, which I love, and I think is such an important question to ask. Claire asks, how does the group measure the success of the messages the RAP conveys in sessions like the one with Minister Watts, and how do you know it has a long-term impact? And I think I'll quickly answer it so the rep can sit back and relax. And we've only got a few more minutes before I think Lucy's joining us. I think I can see you there. Kia ora, Lucy. Such a good and important question, Claire. And again, that's kind of the difference between this being a tokenistic photo op selfie of the minister with some young people and trying to really understand the impact and the potential outcomes from us sharing not just our thoughts with him, but there was also a lot of feelings in that session, which he credit to him, did a lot to acknowledge that this was a heavily feelings session as well as a thought-led session. And so I guess in instances like this, it is hard to measure preemptively see the long-term impact of something like this, but we have every intention of checking in on where our feedback landed, and he certainly opened that door for us and told us he would like to tell us exactly where his feedback did land. It is a little bit early to determine the long-term impact of some of the sessions like that one with the RAP, but we tend to do our best to see what that outcome is. And certainly for some of the other ways that they've contributed, they questioned where biotech was, and the circle put a huge amount of money and resource and time then behind biotech because the impact of those questions in that conversation was significant. So I think that's all the time that we have for this section of the panel. Thank you so much, RAP, for everything you do outside of this session, but also showing up in your lunch breaks and again, sharing not just your thoughts, but I know a lot of feelings with us and the group. So thank you so much for everything. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Guys as well, there's lots more questions that we didn't have time to get to, so we'll try to do something in writing for the people who are asking them and make sure we get you some answers. I can see there's some there that are practical ones that we can ask, but now I'd really like to hear from and throw to a representative of one of our leading partners. These are the organizations that actually put forward the RAP member every year. Lucy Drummond is joining us. She's the GM of Sustainability at Mercury in Auckland, and she's so good because she's come out of another session that she was in just to join us for this, and she's got to rush back into it afterwards. So Lucy, thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Izzy. Kia ora, everyone. And apologies for not being able to join the kōrero earlier. My CEO is departing this week, so we are trying to honour him as we should before he leaves the building. I wanted to join just to provide a few insights into our experience as an organisation who has participated in the Rangatahi Advisory Panel. I guess from the beginning, we've had representatives in both cohorts. Tyra Begbie from one of our iwi partners was our representative in 2023. And I think you guys have already heard from the fantastic Bryn Wilson in our session so far, and he's from our pricing and commercial team. Both years we've been involved, we've gained really valuable learnings from the application process through to hearing from our RAP participant through their experience, and all the way through to getting input on the pieces of work that we have sought feedback on. So I think I wanted to today share those different stages and kind of what we've got out of it to bring to life the experience from the business end. So starting with applications, one of the things that we found really valuable for us in terms of that process are two key reasons. One is, there's nothing like going through a process and actually seeing across your organization who are the people who have an appetite to get involved in this way. That's a new insight for us. Asking people to put their hands up to actually participate in this form is a new piece of information. And then kind of like any process, I guess, this asked new questions of people. And although we would like to think that we really know our people, one of the things that I learned more about from our applicants and seeing our application process is I learned new things about what our people are doing outside of our organisation, which really bring a richness into how they show up, which wasn't really visible to me before. So we've gained some really interesting insights from the application process. Then the process of hearing from our participants. So the way that we generally have approached both of the times that we have been involved, is making sure that we have regular touch points with the people that we have representing us, so that we can probably think about how we're setting that person up to success and providing them with context and information that might be helpful for the conversations that they're going to be part of, but also actually hearing from them. What are the things that they're learning? What are they experiencing as they go along? So the insights and perspectives that we've gained is another area of learning. And I think one of the things that we've really reflected on is the personal development provided to our participants. That's something that we value and something that is quite unique to this offering. Probably like most organisations, we're really focused on personal development of our people, and being able to be exposed to the range of sectors that you see on the panel, being exposed to what I kind of convey as leading edge thinking on natural capital, which the Aotearoa Circle is leading, and learning from their peers that they get really close to, is, from what I can see, a really, really unique personal development opportunity for the participants every time. So, you know, that's something that might be personal to them, but it's something that we as an organisation really value as part of the process. And lastly, getting input on our work. The two pieces of work that we have had the Rangatahi Advisory Panel input on, we've thought really deeply about. We were really mindful that for us, the work needed to be of significant strategic importance. It needed to be at a stage where we were still open for feedback. And that requires us to be pretty honest with ourselves about, you know, whether or not we were being closed off because we'd progressed it too far. So we really kind of kicked the tires on making sure it was really important that we were still open for feedback and that we would enter into the conversation with really genuine intent. And as a result of that, both of the conversations that we had were hugely valuable. The Mercury attendees that we had were the people who were working on the piece of work. I attended, and then at least two of my exec peers attended the two conversations that we've had. And so Mercury were a little bit worried that with that number of people attending these conversations, that we might have overwhelmed the panel with our keenness. But both of the cohorts were very gracious with us as a large group. And the kōrero that we had provided new insights for our work. They provided kind of thinking on ideas of how we could continue to shape the work, and raised questions for us to ask ourselves that could take us to the next step. What we did with those two conversations is that we incorporated it into the next iteration of senior management conversations and board conversations. So we've actually shared those two conversations quite broadly with those senior management groups, and received, again, kind of, other people who even weren't in the room saw the value from those conversations as well. And they have been instrumental in us continuing to shape those pieces of work. So yeah, if I was going to kind of try and summarize the value that we as a corporate entity have gained from participating in the Rangatahi Advisory Panel so far, it would be, what we've learned, the additional insights that we've gained from going through the application process, the personal development of the participants, and the value gained on the specific topics. And I think just one other thing that comes to mind, which I think Bryn might have touched on earlier, is that it's triggered thinking for us on how we might support and incorporate bringing more rangatahi voices into decision making as part of the way that we work. So we're going to give something a go in terms of setting up our own panel, and it won't be perfect the first time we do it, but we're going to learn from it, and then we're going to continue to refine it. I think I've got one more minute, and I did just want to touch about feelings, which I think I heard mentioned just previously. And that is that working in a purpose-driven organisation, there is many opportunities at Mercury to be involved in conversations where you feel like you're making a difference. The feeling that you get when we've had our conversations, I find hard to articulate. There are times at work when you might walk away feeling deflated, and there's times at work where you might walk away feeling energized. And I would find it hard to tell you another conversation that I have walked away from feeling more energized than the two conversations that we had with the panel on the two topics of conversation that we had. And that is a feeling that I've talked to my exec peers about, the other people on the call about, and I would say that it's relatively well shared amongst others. So it might kind of feel intangible, but I would also say that that's a really important part of being part of this very unique offering as well.
Lucy, thank you. That is a really lovely way to sum up why we do it and what it's here for. And thank you for those insights. I hope that also helps people listening who are thinking about doing it themselves to think about how they can do it. And obviously, we'll make that information available to people. They're welcome to contact the circle to get advice about that. But I think we will have to wrap up because we have gone a little bit over time. Well worth it though. You guys have all been amazing. Can I just quickly thank all of you? Lucy, thank you so much for giving us the extra time and zipping out to talk to us. Thank you, Morgan and Tom and Maggie and Zoe and Bryn. And thank you especially to you, Izzy.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks so much, Lucy. See you all next time. Ka kite.